Hello and welcome to my morning note. Nobody seems to be quite sure what to make of Ben Bernanke's Humphrey Hawkins testimony yesterday. He was obviously very bearish about the economy, but he also declined to give any really clear hints that QE is about to happen, and so we've seen somewhat range-bound markets since he spoke. For today, I'd like to talk about Brazil. Now, we all know there's a lot of coffee in Brazil, and many people fear that it's now a rather over-caffeinated economy. Obviously, it rallied for a long time thanks to strong commodity prices, buoyed by demand from China. As that demand has weakened, metals prices in particular have fallen, and Brazil has definitely fallen somewhat out of favour. The real is down significantly, the Brazilian stock market has underperformed other emerging markets, and there is also a concern that there may be something like a nascent consumer credit bubble internally in Brazil, meaning that it doesn't have the domestic ability to withstand problems overseas. Now, is that an unduly pessimistic picture? With me now to discuss this is the Director of Research for Brazil Confidential, the FT's specialist publication which does its own proprietary research on Brazil, Henry Mance. Let's start by taking a look at what you might call Exhibit A for concerns about a consumer credit bubble. You can see that lending rates have been going down. That should be easing the pressure on loans. It doesn't appear to be yet.
Well, not yet, John. The blue line is a great source of concern for investors in bank stocks and others. We've seen non-performing loans, and here it's all loans more than 15 days overdue, rising really quite steeply in 2011 and the beginning of 2012. Investors now are looking for that to peak and to come down. And those lower interest rates, which are being passed on to individuals borrowing, buying cars and other goods, could be the driver. We saw back in 2008 and 2009 that those lower interest rates did pass on into lower.
They're taking a very long time to have that effect this time compared to last time around.
Indeed, we've had a couple of false dawns, and you can see here there's a slight fall in the last month, and that's May's data, particularly in the very, very new non-performing loans. And the question is whether we can see that consistently over 2 or 3 months.
Okay. Let's take a look at Brazil Confidential's own data to see if it can cast any light on this. Now, this is a survey which, as I understand, you've been running for a matter of months now with a panel of Brazilian consumers. Take me through what this tells us.
Yeah, so we've been asking 1,000 Brazilians about their spending habits, and their kind of buoyancy at the checkout has attracted a whole load of brands from Europe and the US and elsewhere to invest in Brazil. One thing we saw back in April was a very sharp slowdown in consumer spending. People saying that they'd spent less and they were much more nervous about the economic outlook. That's subsequently been borne out by retail sales data. And although we had a slightly more positive May from retailers, which is an important month because of Mother's Day, that was again below expectations. Our survey suggests that there's been no rapid rebound in the rest of Q2. So we would not expect to see an improvement, good news coming out in the next month or so.
Which might argue against a big bust, but also argues in favour of something that's rather sluggish. Now let's take a look at what your surveys tell us about how Brazilians feel about the future, how they might be planning their spending.
Yeah, we see this more as consumers taking a breather than having a collapse in their confidence and a collapse in their spending patterns. If we look at what consumers say that they have to spend, their earnings, there is a sharp drop in what they have now, but they're still expecting an improvement towards the end of the year, and that for us is one of the factors why we would expect to see a much better Q3 and Q4 than say in the last couple of months.
And presumably that means they might actually be able to repay some of those consumer loans if they're expecting to get paid more by the end of the year.
Yeah, and interestingly, one of the other responses in our survey is a real nervousness about taking on new loans, with a couple of bright spots, but really I think an acceptance that now is not a great time to go out and start borrowing more. So I think that caution, combined with the oversight of the authorities, who are quite worried and quite vociferous about the loan situation, I think makes us slightly more upbeat than the market on this issue.
Okay, Henry, thank you very much indeed. That's one positive take on the internal dynamics of Brazil. I'd like to finish with one other point, which is that although investors tend to treat Brazil as though it's one large mine, one large exporter, it's actually a relatively closed economy. We really should be paying far more attention to the domestic dynamics and less to its exports.